Out and asked if you had read the indictment. You said you read it word for word, page for page, right?
I did. I keep up. I love Jackson.
Even though they've not been in court and they've not been found guilty, it's just an indictment.
They don't see it. My first statement was, think of your family. Think about your family. Put your family first.
I never thought in a million years we would have been put in the situation that we were in. Never. Because we went through our whole career doing the right thing.
It's utterly ridiculous to me. Utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Othor Cain Show. I'm Othor Cain. Glad to have you aboard on this Thursday evening. It's been a very, very busy week for us, but we are glad to be here tonight. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of those people who have put themselves in position to sponsor this broadcast. We are ever so grateful for that. We appreciate your support of independent Black media. We want you to continue to do that because we could not, absolutely not, to do this without you. So again, thank you very much. We are excited about the show tonight. We've got a very what I seem to think is going to be a very lively discussion. Last night I had an opportunity to trek up 55 and head to my hometown of Canton, Mississippi, and I witnessed a very powerful conversation. I remember, when I was a little young whippersnapper, little party goer, we would assemble at the Elks Lodge for anything but a conversation like the conversation that was held last night. We would go for record hops, for parties, and all of these kinds of socially relevant activities. But last night it was a jam-packed crowd for anything but that, but certainly was about the culture of Canton, Mississippi. The conversation was led last night by State Representative Lawerence Blackmon, who is a freshman lawmaker who represents the city of Canton. He also partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center in Wakenya, Canton, facilitated a portion of the conversation last night as well. I am excited that Representative Lawerence Blackmon is with us tonight, and we're going to pull him in and begin our conversation tonight. Representative Blackmon, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay, there I go.
There you go, man. It's good to have you here, brother. We appreciate you taking time out to be with us. First and foremost, I want to say that last night was very powerful. It was a packed house, a very engaged audience. So kudos to you and your team and all those folk that you were able to pull together to have a very rich and robust conversation last night. So kudos to you. I want to start, though, by asking you, I know last night you talked about what you billed as an election night murder. And it was at that point that you said, enough is enough, something must be done, though you had been working behind the scenes. But talk to me specifically, Representative Blackmon, about pulling last night's event together.
It was just a meeting of the minds, because I'm obviously I'm not the only person who's feeling like something has to be done. And so just in having conversations about how shocking it is that people who we know and people who we are used to seeing and interacting with just, don't drop dead, but are killed in the street. and then nobody is held accountable. And so, there's something about seeing someone who you know and someone who you know has a family that loves them and cares about them laid out in the street dying, and seeing the people who should be in charge of or leading the investigation into who done it really not act with urgency in the minutes and seconds after that homicide was a jarring experience for me, and the lack of empathy or sympathy for that family as they were grieving that acute loss on that night. That was jarring for me, and so for me, it was just time to bring some things to the forefront that I knew had been going on behind the scenes, so that the public can make some decisions about the direction, the collective direction that we want to take this city in. And I think that last night everybody was clear that safety is our number one priority in Canton. And I just don't think I heard enough talk about safety in terms of plans to make this a safer city in some of the debates that have been going on here in Canton. And so it was time to really speak up and bring that conversation to the forefront.
Got it. Let's talk specifically because what I was not able to ascertain last night, and that is a clear picture of the number of homicides in Canton within the last few years. I know, looking at the visual that you guys had set behind you as a backdrop of sorts, there were several pictures up there, but can you walk us through just in terms of the homicide rate in Canton?
I think that if there, because I don't know of any studies that exist that have looked into the homicide rate in Canton, but I bet if you look into it per capita, we probably have one of the higher murder rates in the country. I don't know those exact numbers. I know that we have counted 19 unsolved homicides over the last 5 years. And so, I mean, and that's not even counting, the other things like shooting into a dwelling and the shooting into a car and the attempts on other people's lives that were just not successful. If we looked at the total scope and breadth of this issue, I think that we would find that Canton is punching way above its weight class when it comes to violent crime, and way below where we should be when it comes to getting these crimes solved.
Got it. You seem to also think that because Canton is a small town, it is not getting the attention it needs in this space.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the backdrop. Should I be seeing this picture or should I be seeing you right now?
The picture.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure.
Come on, stay with me, man. Stay with me.
Oh man, that was a powerful moment.
That was
yeah, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, not just Canton, Othor, but I think that if we looked, and I'm gonna request that a peer study be done on this. If we look at our small towns in Mississippi, right, our small Black communities, all of us are kind of dealing with this same issue, right? Outsized violent crime, right? And so I think that we can probably connect that to the fact that we're not getting our fair share from the state legislature when it comes down to appropriations, right? And so for those of you who don't know, the appropriations process is the process by which the legislature decides who and what districts get what amount of money for what projects, right? And so if you follow that kind of thing, then you probably know that we ended the last legislative session without passing a budget at all. So that meant that all of us small towns that have appropriations requests in for certain things like that our police need cars, tasers, anything that they need to be effective in their job, right? Training for investigators. They can't get that money if we haven't passed a budget, right? And so that's a huge problem. We're not getting our fair share. I think that if you look at the percentage that we pay into the state budget in terms of our tax revenue, we're not getting our fair share back. And so I'm going to be requesting next week that a peer study be done on that so that we can bring that issue to the forefront. And hopefully I can work with the leadership in both chambers to make sure that Canton and District 57 gets what we have asked for our police force for this year, which is a $2 million appropriation for certain improvements, including providing cameras all over the city of Canton so that we can be more than just a city of lights. We can be the city of lights and cameras. Very beautiful city. We want to capture everything and everybody that's going on out in public, so that people don't feel like they can get away with these things. They don't feel empowered to commit these violent acts and these brazen violent acts, a lot of times often in daylight now, which lets us know that they have no respect, right? No respect for the neighbors, of course, but no respect for the authorities either.
Got it. Listen, I want to shift because you talked about appropriations. You talked about your requests for, from the legislature. But I want to know specifically about your outreach to Canton's police chief. This is his jurisdiction, right? And so I want to know, prior to this town hall, what has been your outreach efforts or your mode of apparatus in terms of communicating with Police Chief Othor Brown?
So I started receiving some calls from some of the mothers of some of these young men who have been killed, probably over the summer, right? And I talked to them, and they just would ask me if I would just reach out because they weren't getting the response that they felt like they should get from our chief and from our leaders within the Canton Police Department. And so I told them, I would do something, and I kept pushing off the conversation. And one afternoon, late last fall, a good friend of mine had his home shot up for no reason at all. He was hosting and had some people over, and several people were shot, and nobody was arrested for that either. And that really, it shocked me in that it was really close to home. That was one of my oldest friends, if not my oldest friend that I've had in the world. And I said, wow, imagine that I could have just lost that good friend to a drive-by shooting here in Canton, and nobody would have, done anything. He just would have been another one of the unsolved homicides, or my other friends who were there who were shot, and nobody was held accountable for that. And so, at that point, I approached the chief and I said, look, man, we have a real problem here. And to me, it just doesn't seem like it's being addressed adequately. And he said, I don't have the help that I need. I don't have the personnel and things like that. And I said, well, chief, you're a chief. Not only are you a chief, but you're a chief in Madison County, one of the safest counties in the state, one of the safest counties in America. And so you have resources. I think that people would like to help you if you would reach out. I think that you could get help from the sheriff's department and from other jurisdictions, and you could put together a task force to try to tackle and curb some of this violent crime, and also have a show of force to the community that says, that we're doing something about it, which might, shame the devil, so to speak. And so I took the initiative. I said, Chief, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to put something together. And so I took the initiative of putting together a meeting of law enforcement, federal officials, and state officials. The U.S. attorney at the time, Todd G., he attended. And so it was a really well-attended meeting. It was about 30 prosecutors and law enforcement personnel there. And I said, we need help in Canton. The chief was there. I believe the investigator was there. And so, I gave them, a plan of action so that we can curb violent crime. And I said, I hope that you all will take this serious. I have a lot of people in my district who are hurting, they're dying, and we have to do something about it. And, I entered the legislative session thereafter. That was in the beginning of January. And so I didn't follow up until after the legislative session. And I said, hey, it's getting warm, the days are getting longer. If we don't, get a handle on it early, we're going to lose control of the summer and we won't get it back. And so a couple of weeks after that, a young woman here in Canton had her car ambushed. An ambush style shooting, that's something that has become common here in Canton. In the law, they call it a common scheme or plan. And so, at that time, I reached out again and I said, hey, look, it's starting to happen. We have got to do something. And I didn't really press the issue. And when I followed up, they said, we haven't heard from the chief. And I said, well, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And so when Miguel Walsh was killed last week, and I feel like God put me in proximity to that situation for that reason. It was election night. I had plans to stop by both candidates' celebration party or watch party and congratulate them on a race well run. But, the night kind of got away from me, and I was still somewhere else, kind of debating, the politics of the day. And that shooting happened only feet away from us. And so that was a life altering and trajectory altering experience for me. It told me that I couldn't wait on anybody else to take this on. I had to do it myself, And I told somebody, if I have to be Mary Hawkins of Canton, then I'll be Mary Hawkins of Canton. I don't think they would do that in Madison, you know, and get
I
away
don't know
with
if I like that analogy, but I get.
I mean, they wouldn't do it in her city. You know, she has her city together. She has her
Yeah.
city tight, and there are certain things that are just not going to go on and go unanswered in her
Right,
town.
but there are so
she
many
demands
differences
accountability.
between. Right, but there are so many differences between Canton and Madison, and that's a debate for another day, and we can go
Canton
there.
is a more beautiful city.
Right, right. But I would steer you in this direction. I want to be clear that your move last night was not from an adversarial standpoint with the chief of police.
You know, I like the chief. Look, I go to Mount Zion. I'm a member of Mount Zion. My family has been a member of Mount Zion for probably close to 100 years. You know, 3 generations, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would be the 4th generation. A member of Mount Zion. Chief is a member of Mount Zion. He sings in the choir. I believe him to be a good person, but he's not meeting the moment, just to be frank. And as for me as an elected official, you know, if I ever begin to let the people down, if I'm not meeting the people's expectation, then I would want somebody to call me out. You know, I would want somebody to call me out. And so, you know, it's not personal, it's business, and even more important than business is safety. It's safety.
Absolutely.
I don't feel safe in my own community anymore, and that's unacceptable for me. And I think that in any community, you know, if you're elected officials, if the people who are in charge of keeping you safe, if the people who are in charge of keeping your city beautiful are not doing their job, then I think that the people should rise up and let them know that we're not going to accept that. And in Canton, I think that we have accepted too little for too long.
Got it. Now, the assistant police chief was there for a while yesterday, and I reached out to him today, and I was unsuccessful in connecting with him. But he was there for a minute last night. As far as what I heard you say, I did not see him. But when I did see a portion of his interview on Channel 16, he talked about looking at those pictures and being able to make the determination that they weren't from Canton.
That was so strange to me. That was so strange to me. Such a lame excuse, you know. But that is the type of things that I've been hearing behind closed doors, these kind of excuses that really don't amount to much, you know. There's no excuse for some of these things, and even trying to make an excuse for it seems really bad. At some point, you have to just own up to it and say, well, hey, you know, maybe we dropped the ball, but we'll change course. But the fact that excuses are always being made lets me know that, you know, maybe they're in denial a little bit about their performance. And while they're in denial, people are dying.
You know, you had 3 very powerful ladies on the panel with you last night, and each one had a story of their own. I mean, and those stories were absolutely powerful. The young lady that, well, for me, where I sit now on my left, she was probably to the far right if you look in the other direction. She talked about her mother dying and dying without getting justice for her grandson. And she felt that was probably, you know, something that helped drove her to the grave. The Hispanic young lady from the Latino community talked about 6-year-old Jason being shot while he was with his mom at a gas station. And a young lady in the middle talked about her son, you know, leaving the house and being ambushed and followed. All of them very powerful stories and powerful stories from the audience as well. Although Representative Blackmon with the common theme of justice not being served, right? Peace not being in the streets of Canton. How do you begin to rebuild that?
Well, we have got to, as elected officials, for one, show the public that we feel their pain and we hear their cries, and that we're going to act. You know, we're going to act. And I think that the way to do that, in my humble opinion, is to swiftly make a change in leadership at the police department. Right. So, you know, a lot of people spoke last night, but the sentiment was uniform that we're not being protected and served correctly. And I think that is an issue that starts at the top. And so I think that by immediately making a move to sideline this chief and bring somebody else in on a temporary acting basis until we can evaluate whether or not we should bring somebody else in on a permanent basis. I think that's one way. I think we should add to that bringing in a chief homicide detective. I have spoken to several really well-known and well-respected members of the law enforcement community here and around Canton and Madison County, and all of them have been more than willing to come on board if the Board of Aldermen will make the right move to do that. And so I'm going to make that presentation to the board next week on Monday. I will be joined also then by some families of some of these victims of these unsolved homicides. And then we're planning a sleep-in beginning on Tuesday afternoon at 4:30 at City Hall. And I propose that we don't leave until we get, first of all, some answers and some action. And I can tell you, as an elected official, as somebody who's involved in the political arena, sometimes, I think that politicians can kind of try to stave things off, saying we're going to look into it and we're going to study this and consider that, and then hoping that a movement like this dies and down in the meantime. But we're not going to let that happen. And I think that the only way to do that is to continue with this momentum, carry forward expeditiously, and meet them at City Hall this Tuesday and tell them that we have expectations, and if they're not met, then it's going to be a long night.
Got it. How realistic, though, is it to think that immediate change can happen within the police department when the city is in the middle of an election, right? New people will be in place in June. So how realistic is it to think that something can happen before June at the earliest?
I really believe that Tim Scott is going to be our next mayor, and Tim Scott is on the board of aldermen right now. We still, even though elections are in play right now, we still have a sitting government, and they still have a job to do. We still expect them to do that job and not to punt the can down the road when we have an acute issue here. And it's been an issue, but right now people are saying that we want change. We want it immediately. We know that the summertime is when we typically see a spike in violent crimes, and we want to stave that off. And in addition to that, I think it's very clear that some of the people who are involved in some of these crimes, they're paying attention. They're watching, they're seeing what's happening, and they're going to judge us based off of what we do in this moment, right? And so if we don't push forward, right, if we don't demand accountability from our other elected officials right now in this moment, we're going to send the wrong message, not only to the broader community, but specifically to that very small group of people who have been committing these homicides in town. They're going to know that we don't mean business, so they're going to think that we don't mean business, and that is going to send the wrong message. At some point, you have to listen to the people. The people were very clear last night. I don't think that we've seen a town hall of that size and magnitude in Canton in decades. And so I think that every elected official should take heed to the people. I know that I have, and I will continue to do that. And whatever it takes to get something done, we're going to do it. And so that's why I said a temporary acting chief, bring somebody in who can get to work immediately, securing this town and reestablishing order in the street. And then when a new administration comes in, begin the search for a new permanent chief and seek the public input on that, right? So the public is very interested in this issue, obviously. And so seek the public's input on who's going to replace this chief. Maybe deal with people who are familiar to this community already. We have a lot of really good officers who are homegrown people here from Canton. Who are members of the Canton Police Department. Some are members of the state troopers. Some of them are chiefs in other jurisdictions. And so we need to take a close look at some of them who could come in really quickly, who know some of the players in the street and can get something done about what's been going on here. And then at the same time, bring in a chief homicide investigator to start working some of these cold cases, especially some of the ones where we know what went on. It's just really kind of silly that as elected officials, we haven't put more oomph into bringing these people to justice.
You mentioned Tim Taylor, in your opinion, perhaps will be the next mayor in Canton. Apparently, he was there last night, and I didn't see him. I left, I guess, before.
You missed it.
I missed it. I'm not going to say I missed the main part of the show, but I had a very vocal part of the show. But I was able to see some video clips of somebody who was still there and actually took some footage of Tim's public piece in that meeting. Tim offered a little pushback to you. Tell me about the political dynamics with what you're doing and what the leadership in Canton is doing.
Well, I can understand how, as a sitting part of a body who is in charge of that part of the municipal government, could maybe take offense. It certainly wasn't in my intent to put Tim on the spot that way, but I did want to let Tim know in public, as I have let him know in private. I initiated this many months ago, like I said, and I told aldermen, I called all of them, and I said, I'm going to bring these victims' families down to City Hall. We're going to demand answers. And so, but when I talked to the chief, I kind of fell back and I said, I'll put together this meeting. We'll try that, right? Really thinking that we can get some answers. But what people got was just a glimpse of what it's been like behind the scenes. We don't always get along in leadership, but it's not personal with me ever. And so I believe that Tim can be a great mayor. I think that one of the ladies who was there and commented after that moment, and I think she spoke to that she believed that Tim could be a very great mayor for Canton. I would echo that sentiment. Tim and I have gotten along great in the past. We've had conversations about this in the past, as he mentioned last night, and I'm not upset about that. I think that we were all very passionate about this issue, and I think that's
from the clip that I've heard, from the clip that was sent to me that I heard, I don't know the situation in its full context, but from the clip that I was able to see last night, he was pushing back on you're trying to frame him or position him in a certain light. What light was he pushing back on?
Yeah, I was just telling him that, we're going to be there on Tuesday and we're going to be watching, what everybody does. And we want to know, what side are our aldermen on, my fellow elected officials. Are we on the side of the community or the killers? I mean, I think that's what this moment is about. And so, what I really would have liked to have saw was him address those families in that moment, right? Address the room, not address me. I'm just one person. We can talk on the phone later. But this is an opportunity for us as elected officials to let the public know in front of all of these people, in front of all of these cameras, that we hear them, we feel them, and that we're going to do something about it. And so, that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but it's not going to be too late. We'll be there Tuesday. We'll be there Monday. And so hopefully Tim and I can get on the same page about moving this city forward and come together for the betterment of Canton.
Representative Blackmon, what are you expecting from the Board of Aldermen in Canton?
So the first thing I'm asking is, again, that if he has not resigned by that time, that they remove the chief, or at least put the chief on suspension or inactive duty, or demote him from the chief to a beat officer or a desk job. And this is not beating up on the chief behind his back. He's not hearing this from me for the first time, even though he may be catching some of this stuff that's been going on this week. Him and I have had this discussion before in private, and it is not personal at all. But I know way too many people in the last 5 years who have become victims of homicides. People who have been murdered and nobody has been held accountable. It is mind-blowing, and we must not normalize that level of callousness, that level of evil, and that level of violence in our community. We have got to stamp it out. We have got to call it out. We got to shine a light on it, and we have got to shame the devil. And we've got to hold these people accountable, quite frankly, and I'm committed to that.
In the chief's quest for help, what have you done to help?
In his quest, well, I told you, I put together a huge meeting full of every type of agency.
Let me cut you off right there. I don't think the meeting, though, addresses staffing needs, right? I know his numbers are way low. So low, even a town as small as Canton, he does not have the staff. He does not have adequate staff to cover Canton.
I agree with that. And so for my part, what I have done is, again, I have put in an appropriations request for $2 million for the Canton Police Department that is still pending in the legislature because we haven't passed a budget. So I understand the staffing problem, and for a while I allowed that to hold me off from drawing a conclusion. But last Tuesday I was on the scene, and there were a lot of officers there, city officers and county officers. There were about 5 to 6 city officers there, and there were multiple county officers as well. And what I saw was not an issue with personnel. It was an issue that money would fix. If we put more money into it right now, we would just be putting money into a broken machine, right? Just like a slot machine or a video game machine. You wouldn't keep putting coins in if you know it's not working. You would fix it first, and then you would put your coins in. And so I think that if we were to put $2 million into the Canton Police Department right now, we would just be bloating a broken machine. And so that's not my intent. I'm hoping that I can work with the city council to get that issue solved. If we can't, I think that I would maybe even consider asking the legislature to revert that appropriations request to the county and see if we can work with them to get back involved in the nuances of policing the city like they were prior to the litigation several years ago.
Rob Nichols, my cousin, is asking, is Jay Bird using his county partner since he's low staffed?
Well, again, the low staff thing was the answer that I got 6 months ago, which led me to suggesting putting together a task force, which led me to putting together that meeting along. But no task force was put together, and no effort was put forth. And so the word out there, I've been meeting with a lot of law enforcement officials lately, trying to, gauge their temperature on this. And the word is that Jay Bird will not accept nor ask for help.
Wow, wow. Last night, and I'm sure you can hear it from the stage, but sitting in that audience and being able to hear the whispers and the private conversations around me. That front row was talking. The ladies to my left were talking. The ladies behind me were talking, and they were all grieving, and they were all crying out for help.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also a serious space of distrust between those citizens and law enforcement in Canton. And one of the things that you said last night is that you've got to reinvigorate that trust, rebuild that trust, re-energize trust in that space. Realistically, how do you do that?
Again, you have to start with replacing the leadership. I don't think that this leadership could be recovered. I don't think that the trust has been lost under this administration's leadership as far as the police department goes. I don't think it can be regained. There are too many families who have been hurt, who have not had a resolution, who have not had a response that they feel like is appropriate to having somebody be murdered. You heard people say last night that they had their loved one killed, and nobody said cat, dog, or nothing since then. And there are a whole lot of people out here like that. Not to include those who have been victims of aggravated assault and attempted murder, who haven't heard from a police since the day it happened. Somebody spoke to that on one of the posts on social media. And so I don't think that this chief and assistant chief could ever regain the trust of this community, unfortunately, when it comes to law enforcement. And so for that reason, I think that the Board of Aldermen need to act immediately next week and move to replace this leadership.
A few moments ago, Representative Blackmon, you kind of mentioned that Canton is in the county of Madison. You got all of these resources and all these people, that could possibly be at Chief Brown aid and the Canton Police Department's aid in terms of help. I just got a text from another law enforcement personnel member who says the county will not work with Canton or the chief. They want nothing to do with Canton unless it's an emergency and mutual aid. How would you respond to that?
And they may or may not know this, but there was a lawsuit several years ago, a class action lawsuit against the county for some of the things that were taking place at that time. And so I think that after that lawsuit, the county just kind of pulled out of the city altogether. And I don't think that was right either. I think that we deserve balance. I don't think that it should be that if we can't, choke the shit out of you, then we're not going to police you at all. And so I'm confident. I have grown and evolved so much, as a person, as a professional, as a citizen of the city of Canton. And so I'm hoping that I can come together with the sheriff's department and that they will get more involved in policing the city and helping us get the city back under control.
Very good. What would you say to those people out there, Representative Blackmon, who would raise the position or posture themselves into saying this is just political for you? You're doing this as a political stunt.
Yeah, I don't really do anything political. You don't see me out with the lobbyists. You don't see me at the balls and the this and the that. I really don't, put a lot of stock into that. And so I think that that's ridiculous. This has happened. This was spurred by me witnessing a murder. And so there's nothing political about that. There's not much political about me. I like to watch, the political shows on Sunday and stuff like that. But I don't play the political gamesmanship that some people seem to think that I may be playing. That's just not my style. I'm a very down home, real Cantonian. And so I've always been that. Even if I were not in politics, I would still be doing this. If you just were to Google me and look at some of my background, I've had protests here in the city before. That was before I was in politics. I was involved in bringing a class action lawsuit against the sheriff's department for some pretty flagrant violations back in the day. That was before I was in politics. And so I've always been involved in the fight for civil rights here in Canton. When I say always, as long as I've been an adult and out of law school and have had the courage to speak up, I've been doing that. And so I've only been in politics for like the last 2 years. This is just my second session. And this is really the first thing that I've done in that space since then. But if you look at my history, I think that speaks for itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I know last night was not a one shot in this space. I know you are creating, and those that are with you and working along with you and pushing this, you're pushing it into a movement. So showing up at City Hall on Tuesday, what's next?
I'm going to show up on Monday. I'm going to present my case for change in leadership at the Canton Police Department. You know, I've gotten a lot of support from law enforcement and a lot of intel from law enforcement, and I think that we're all in agreement on some things, that something has to change. But in addition to that, I'm going to be reaching out to Attorney General Lynn Fitch. I've already written her letter. I'm kind of working on it and, you know, shaping it up, but I'll release that publicly next week as well. I'll be sending her a letter asking her to step in and help to investigate some of these cold cases using some of her resources, but also investigate any irregularities in these investigations within the Canton Police Department.
What does the district attorney in Madison County, what role does he play?
I would say that we probably have the best district attorney's office, certainly one of the best district attorney's offices in the state of Mississippi. Certainly Scott Cologne up in Oktibbeha County, they're very good. And up in Forest.
Yeah, I'm glad you called Scott's name, because I was going to say, wait a minute now.
Yeah, I know Scott. They're great. In Forest County, they're very great. But here in Madison and Rankin counties, I think that we have some of the best and most well-run and well-managed district attorney's office. They're very committed to justice. They are not the holdup here at all. I can say that. And I think that if we could get them what they need, they would move with haste to prosecute these offenders.
You know, I did have an opportunity to have a conversation with a couple of members of the Hispanic community last night, and I know everybody is scared, right? I know these are frightening times, and people, and you alluded to the fact that you've been asleep in your bed and you've had to jump to the floor, right, to take cover. But in talking to two young ladies last night, they feel as if they are being targeted, and they are really afraid. And I really like how the lady that was on the panel last night, she said, you know, I get drunk too, you know, I drink beer and I get drunk too. But specifically speaking to that populace of people, what kind of words would you give them about being in this space?
They are absolutely welcome in this community. I think it's so good that they have chosen to take root in Canton. They make this a more vibrant community. They're buying some of these dilapidated properties and fixing them up, and they're opening businesses and contributing to the tax base. And I look forward to getting more of the Hispanic community into leadership positions in Canton. Maybe get some on the police force. Maybe get some of them on the board of aldermen and into our politics, so that they can be looking out for their community's interests as well. But I love the Hispanic community. And I am going to continue to work on their behalf, just like I'm going to work on everybody else's behalf, and to get justice for them and their families as well. And we're going to do everything that we can do to make sure that our Hispanic community is protected. And I think that getting those cameras, right, going back to getting that appropriations bill passed, we're going to lock in with one of these companies that provide those cameras that can go all over the city and get us some shot spot technology. And so we're really going to beef up our technological approach to fighting crime in this city, and also making sure that the Canton Police Department has an adequate budget for hiring more officers and getting staffed up, getting better vehicles if that's what they need, or whatever it is that they need to be most effective at their job. But again, I go back to the fact that putting money into a broken machine is not going to help you beat the game.
Got it. I want to shift to the responsibility of the audience that was there, but I want to be very clear and offer this caveat. This is not victim blaming, so I don't want anybody to misinterpret it as such. But I do think that there is a level of responsibility for the residents of Canton. What do you think that responsibility is?
Well, I think the responsibility of the community is to come together and show the bad guys that we are stronger, that we are more united, and that we are more determined than they are, and more determined than ever to have peace in our town. And I think that the first thing that has to happen is that the leadership, people like myself, people like the Board of Aldermen, have got to come together and say that enough is enough, and enact an emergency plan of action so that people can feel safe and people can feel comfortable. And I think that once that happens, we'll be able to work together more as a community to solve some of these unsolved crimes and also prevent other crimes from happening. Because once those who are inclined to do this kind of stuff learn that it's not safe to do it here, they're gonna stop. They're going to stop. They're not shooting up houses and cars and stuff in broad daylight in Gluckstadt. They're not doing it in Madison. They're not doing it in Ridgeland. All of these guys, they don't just stay in Canton. They go other places. They're not doing it in the other places that they go because they know they won't get away with it. But they come back home to Canton and do it because they know that we have a very lackadaisical leadership within the Canton Police Department, and their approach to solving crimes is very lackadaisical. Even the assistant chief last night said, well, you can have all the evidence in the world, but if you don't have an eyewitness, I mean, that's bullshit. I'm a defense attorney. That is total bullshit. And so there are some things that I'm just not going to let skate. I'm just not going to let it go. There's no reason that a vehicle that they know was used in a murder would be released to somebody, and I'll bet you they don't even know who it was released to. That vehicle should still be in cold storage somewhere and waiting for the day that we bring these people to justice, not just released to who shot John. What in the world is that about? But that speaks to a vacuum in leadership within that department, and that is a problem that cannot be kicked down the road. I still want the new administration, of course, whatever direction they want to take it in is their prerogative, and we're going to reserve that for them. But we need to bring in a temporary acting chief, somebody who is already in law enforcement, somebody who's already official, in tune with the local community here, and can hit the ground running.
There was a young lady in the audience last night who said, and I'm paraphrasing here. She said, a lot of us know what's going on. We know, but we are afraid to communicate, to share for fear of retribution.
If everybody knows that the killers are still running the street, hell yeah, they're scared. I mean, who would not be,
Right. But I guess the central question is, though, how do you offer her a safety nest?
By getting rid of the chief and the assistant chief immediately and letting her know that we mean business.
I don't think unsolved murders are going to go down when you get rid of them tomorrow.
No. That's not going to happen immediately. There is no immediate solution. Right. That is something that will let people, at least make them open up to getting comfortable again, right? People have people are they're not trusting, and they have walls up, and so we have to start to bring those walls down, but we're not going to be able to do it with the same people. Again, I don't think that is going to be a redeemable issue. And so I don't even think that it should be a discussion about what we do from here. I think the discussion should be how long are we going to take to look for a new chief, and what type of chief are we going to be looking for?
I get it. Desmond says, you sound like you would be a good mayor. You should have put your name in the hat.
No, I mean, I'm going to do whatever I'm called to do. So I don't know what direction the Lord is going to take my life, but whatever direction he takes my life in, I'm going to answer that call, and I'm going to go about it full steam ahead.
Got it. Last night, here's how I would describe you. So last night, you sounded like a mix of a Baptist preacher and a club dweller, if you will. You sound
what?
A club dweller. You sound like a mix of a Baptist preacher and a club dweller. But in all seriousness, what role does the faith community play in this space?
For me, the faith community has played a huge role. I mean, this has been such a stressful week. I mean, one of the most stressful weeks of my life. I haven't slept much. I'm exhausted right now. I'm just, we're not finished, but I am tired. And it has only been my faith in God that has made me able to jump up in the morning and hit the ground running and put this together with my team so quickly. I had to see a pastor, the day before this, because, I just was feeling, the burden of carrying this. It was very heavy in that moment. And so I went to a pastor and I said, Pastor, I need you to pray for me. I need you to pray with me, and I need you to pray for me that I will be able to carry this for these families and for these victims and for my neighbors in this town. And so he did that, and I felt relieved. I felt relieved immediately, and I meditated all yesterday on the Lord, and I think it's him, right? I'm just a vessel. Whatever direction he points me in, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to move in fear. I'm willing to stay at the Capitol until the next Tuesday if I have to. And so I'm asking that people come in shifts. I know that some people work at night. When you get off, come come in between your shifts or whatever, and I'll be there the whole time. And anybody else who's able to, I'm asking them to join me the whole time. And let's really demand some accountability, not just talk. I hate talks. God, I hate talks, but I like action. I love action, and so let's get some action, and let's get out of there and go home at a decent hour on Tuesday.
Very good. I know you talked about the Appropriations Committee and asking for $2 million for Canton, but a young man, Jonathan, I don't know if you've heard you talk about that earlier, but Jonathan Dixon, a young man that I really admire the work that he's doing in Canton. He says, with the city being in debt and currently unable to receive grant money, what are your plans on obtaining the funds?
Well, Jonathan, like I mentioned earlier, I have a $2 million request pending before the legislature right now in the form of a special projects request. And so I'm going to, in addition to sending a letter to Lynn Fitch, I'm also sending a letter next week to Speaker Jason White, urging him to pass that appropriations request and not make it a penny short of the $2 million that we're asking for, because we need it. Canton didn't get anything last year in appropriations from the House, and I just think that's unacceptable. We have every member of the House to at least get $1 million out of the appropriations process every single year. We all go there, we all participate in the lawmaking process, and so to send a lawmaker home to their district without nothing is not something that any legislator should experience. And you should not wonder if you're going to be able to bring something back home to your tax-paying constituents from the budget. That should always happen, at least a minimum of $1 million. So I'll send that letter off to the speaker next week.
Representative Blackmon, it takes a lot of people to do this work, right? It takes a lot of people.
A lot.
You cannot do this by yourself. I was happy to see some of the partnerships that you formed in this space, particularly with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I was really happy to see a fellow Cantonian, Othor Cain, in the space. And I was happy to see the attorney who also serves on the school board there. Right. In this space. Tell me a little bit about your outreach to other partners.
So I worked with the SPLC at different times, and Othor Cain is great. She's a great organizer. She's a great resource. And so when we kicked this off, I actually went to Othor's church last Sunday and to try to promote this event. And so we talked, I believe, we didn't even talk until Tuesday. But when we talked on Tuesday, she was already in action, already had a plan. She already had an agenda. And so I really like that. I love people who are about action, and Othor Cain is about action. She's from Canton as well. And so, she's tough, she's smart, she's articulate, and she's just a great person to have on the team. And my other team members as well, man. I don't do anything without them. They are the ones who have elevated me to this position, right? You can hold the title, but it's more than a title, right? It's a position within the community, right? And so it's only the local community that has come together and put me in a position to be able to make a call like this. And so I will never forget them. I will try to never let them down. And so I'm so thankful for the whole community for coming together to make last night's town hall a success.
And you represent District 57, right?
District 57, the best district in the state of Mississippi.
I don't know. Justice would beg the difference. He would say,
I bet he would. Justice is a fellow Howard graduate, and so I know what Justice is going to bring to the table. You know what I'm saying?
That's my guy. Justice is my guy, man, without a doubt. But speaking of House District 57, tell me a little bit about their outcry in this space.
Well, I mean, I think you saw it last night. That was the district. We had people from Yazoo. We had people from all over the district. We had people there from West Bentonia. We had people there from all over, all into the Delta. People came from as far as Macomb. And so I think it speaks to the breadth of the issue. It's a district-wide issue in all of our Black districts. This increasing violent crime, and so the issue is in part that we're not getting what we should be getting from the legislature. Our police departments are understaffed. I used to serve as the board attorney for the town of Goodman. the good folks of Goodman, they were understaffed and they were having problems keeping certified officers because they didn't have the money. And they're not getting what they should be getting from the legislature as well. So that's a huge problem. I'll be requesting a peer review, like I said, to look into that issue more deeply, and I'll be looking to bring that issue to the forefront during the next legislative session.
Good deal. Listen, and we're just about out of time, but I do want to just go back to the police department because I do think that there are several, in Othor Brown's defense, I think that there are several. I think there are several factors that contributes to him being understaffed, right? I think there are several factors that contributes to that. And I think in your quest for the $2 million appropriation piece and any other external funding or internal funding, I think that those issues must be addressed. One being pay, right? Another being the outdated equipment that the officers are using there. I've heard that repeatedly every single time that I do a story in Canton and about crime. People tell me about equipment, community accountability. But here's one that I think that you've touched on. You've touched on it from the chief's perspective, but I think other officers have to feel empowered to do their jobs, man. And I think that there's a lack of that kind of autonomy and independence of doing their job.
I think that we heard some of that last night in some of the comments from people, and I would agree with that. I think that too many of our junior officers have not been empowered enough. They haven't been trained to the degree that they should be trained to. They haven't received the support and getting the education to further their career in law enforcement that I think that they should be getting. And so one of the other things that we'll be asking the Board of Aldermen to do is to set funds aside, maybe from this $2 million appropriations, to send some of our officers to get training in forensic science, so that they could be better at collecting evidence when in the crucial early moments after these things happen, making it much more likely that these cases will be solved. And so I think that that's how you empower your junior officers to be the best that they can be and be the most effective officers that they can be in the streets.
Very good. Representative Blackmon, I appreciate you being here tonight, man. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate your stick-to-itness attitude and not being deterred no matter what is thrown your way. I would give you, though, an opportunity to make a final appeal and talk about next steps collectively, how people can plug into this work.
So, we can't lose this moment. Like I said, it's so important that we send the right message to the community, which is that we will not be deterred, we will not be bullied, we will not be silenced, we will not be intimidated, and we will not back down, and we will not stop until we get the answers and the actions that we are looking for, that we deserve, and that are long overdue. But the only way that we can do that is if we continue to march forward. Last night was great, but it was only step one. Step two will be Monday, when I will be before the city council, or the Board of Aldermen rather. And I'm asking anyone who is able to join me there so that they can bear witness to this. And not only that, people who would like to share comments with the Board of Aldermen. Specifically, I'm asking for family members of these victims of these unsolved crimes who are able to come out, that they come out on Monday. That is the day to give comments to the board. Let me know before close of business tomorrow, so that I can make sure that you are added to the Board of Aldermen's agenda and are able to speak on Monday. But we have got to continue this with the same intensity that we did last night into next week on Monday and Tuesday, so that we can have the best shot of getting the best outcome possible out of this moment, and letting the wrongdoers know who's in charge in this city, that they have no authority in this city, and that we are taking the streets back to the extent that they have taken them over. We're taking them back, and that we're not going to back down from that, no matter what they say.
Just a piece of clarity. So Monday is the Board of Aldermen meeting, or Tuesday?
So Monday is the work session. So they have a work session before they actually, do their voting and debating and things. And so they're going to have the work session on Monday, and that's when they invite the public to give comments on things during work sessions. So that's going to be Monday. It's going to start at 4:30. I will get there at 6 o'clock on Monday, but I will get there at 4:30 on Tuesday, which is the actual meeting where we will be asking them to take up the issue of safety in Canton and vote on certain things like change in leadership. Switching that up and taking some immediate action on this very acute, and it's both acute and long-standing, but it's a very serious issue that deserves our immediate attention and our immediate action.
Very good. Representative Blackmon, sir, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, you are one of my favorites in this space. You are one of the people in the Democratic Party that gives it life. And so I appreciate you for all of your efforts. And, you know, I'll come on and be a guest anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, my brother. Certainly appreciate it. That's Representative Lawerence Blackmon. He represents House District 57 in the city of Canton. Again, last night was simply amazing. It was a jam-packed room. I enjoyed the energy, you know, not just from the panel and not just from the panel and that official piece, but to be in that audience and just to hear the outcry, right, and the support, and to recognize the real need there. It was absolutely amazing. This is great work. We are committed to telling the stories of Canton and making sure that there's some resolution and that peace is restored. So again, kudos to Representative Lawerence Blackmon for leading the way in that space. Next week, we'll talk to some folks from Clarksdale, Mississippi. You know, I'm not going to spoil it for you today, but for those of you who have not seen the movie Sinners, you need to get to the theater before Tuesday and see it. You need to get to the theater before Tuesday and see it. We don't necessarily plan to do a review on it. Sinners is set in Clarksdale, though filmed somewhere in Louisiana, but it is centered around Clarksdale. There's a young man in Clarksdale, Tyler Yarbrough, who has created a petition to say, hey, you know, there's no movie theater in Clarksdale. And so if you're going to do a movie about my hometown and you've done your research and the movie is spot on, why don't you come to Clarksdale? Why don't you do a screening of the movie in Clarksdale? Because there's no theater in Clarksdale. And so Tyler has seen, he's seen the movie twice, but he's had to drive 80 miles outside of Clarksdale to go see it. So we're going to talk about his efforts in getting this petition started and helping to lead the way for the movement in Clarksdale. We'll do that on Tuesday. Also on Tuesday, we're going to try our best to head to Canton and cover that Board of Aldermen meeting as well. That's our broadcast for tonight. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Remember, don't stop your support because we could not do this without you. We are committed to independent Black media, and we thank you for your support. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you again. And so our goal, it's Father's Day weekend. It's that Saturday, right? Our goal is to get in, have some good workshops, get a good lunch and an etiquette session at lunch, right? If we can grab hold of one young man, and if we can partner this young man with an adult male, right? We believe this day will be transformative because we believe this relationship can build and last. All it takes is one. All it takes is one. It takes absolutely just one. And so we need your support. We need your support. We need your support on recommending young men for this.